You walk into a forest. Birds are everywhere, singing in the trees, hopping across the ground. Dozens of species all around you, and you are hungry. Genuinely hungry. Not skip lunch hungry. Survival hungry. The kind of hungry where your legs feel weak and your vision starts to blur. You look up. A sparrow lands on a branch 3 feet from your face. A crow watches you from a fence post. A hawk circles slowly overhead. There's food all around you. Everywhere you look. Protein, energy, life. But you don't eat any of it. You don't even reach for it. Something inside you says no. And here is the strange part. That feeling isn't disgust. It isn't unfamiliarity. It is something older and quieter than both of those things. It is a rule. A rule so deeply buried in your brain that you never even notice it's there. A rule that was written into your ancestors long before you were born. Most people would say we don't eat wild birds because we simply don't need to. We have supermarkets, we have chickens, we have food. But that's not the real answer. Not even close. Because even when humans were starving, even when survival was on the line, there were entire categories of birds our ancestors looked at and chose not to eat. Not because they couldn't, because something stopped them. Something that has been running silently in the background of the human mind for thousands of years. Stay until the end of this video, because the last part doesn't just explain what's happening with the birds, it explains something happening inside your own head right now, something you probably never noticed. Let's start with a number, just one number. 5 grams, that is the average amount of usable meat on a common house sparrow. 5 grams. Less than a single French fry. A full-grown sparrow weighs about 30 grams total. But bones, feathers, organs, strip all of that away, and you are left with roughly 5 grams of muscle. Not enough to fill a tablespoon? Now think about what it would cost you to catch that sparrow in the ancient world. No gun, no trap set and ready. Just you. An open forest, and an animal that can fly at 40 miles per hour and change direction in a fraction of a second. The average human hunter-gatherer needed around 2,000 calories a day just to survive. Research on modern hunter-gatherer groups, studied intensively by anthropologist Kim Hill throughout the 1980s and 1990s, showed that ancient humans were brutally efficient calorie calculators. They ate what gave them the most return for the least effort. Every calorie you spend chasing food has to be paid back by the food you catch. If the math doesn't work, you don't chase it. Simple as that. A sparrow does not pass the math test. Not even close. The energy burned catching one sparrow would require you to catch roughly 15 more just to break even. You would literally be starving yourself by hunting them. And this isn't just sparrows. It applies to robins, finches, warblers, thrushes, blackbirds. Every small songbird you see perched outside your window right now. They are tiny, they are fast, and the return is almost nothing. So the first reason we never eat them isn't cultural, it isn't religious, it is pure ancient arithmetic. Your brain quietly ran the numbers, and the numbers said no. But here's what's fascinating. The math alone doesn't explain everything, because there are big birds out there, birds with real meat on them. Eagles, vultures, hawks, owls. These are serious animals. A golden eagle weighs up to 15 pounds. A condor can stretch its wings over 9 feet wide. That is real food. That should be worth the hunt, but we don't eat those either. So why? The answer has to do with something called bioaccumulation, and it is genuinely alarming once you understand it. Every animal eats other animals. Every time a small creature gets eaten by a bigger one, the toxins, heavy metals, and parasites inside that small creature get transferred upward. They don't disappear. They concentrate. A hawk that eats 50 mice over a month absorbs everything those 50 mice ever absorbed. A hawk that spends a year eating songbirds accumulates toxins from thousands of individual prey animals. By the time that hawk is fully grown, its muscle tissue is dense with stored contaminants that would never affect a single mouse but become a serious biological crisis when concentrated in one body. Researchers studying contamination in birds of prey, including work published by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds and environmental toxicologists throughout the 1990s and 2000s, consistently found elevated levels of lead, mercury, and organochlorine compounds in eagle and hawk tissue. These are animals at the top of the food chain, and they pay for it biologically. Your ancient ancestors didn't have the word bioaccumulation, But they did have the experience of eating a predator bird and getting sick, and once that lesson was learned, it was passed on. First as instinct, then as taboo, then as written law. This is why the Book of Leviticus, one of the oldest surviving texts in human history, lists forbidden birds almost exclusively as birds of prey and carrion eaters. Eagles, ospreys, hawks, falcons, vultures, owls. Ancient food law wasn't random. It was the distilled memory of thousands of years of trial and error, written down as sacred rule so that no one would ever need to learn it the hard way again. But then the story gets even stranger. Imagine you are a person in the ancient world. You are hungry. You see a vulture feeding on a dead animal by the road. The vulture is big. It has meat. But something in your stomach turns. Something in your mind says, wrong. Not dangerous, not forbidden, just wrong. Deeply, viscerally, unmistakably wrong. That feeling has a name. Psychologists call it the disgust response, and it was studied extensively by researcher Paul Rosen at the University of Pennsylvania throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Rosen found that disgust is one of the oldest emotional systems in the human brain. It evolved as a disease avoidance mechanism. Its entire job is to make you physically repelled by things that could make you sick before you even touch them. And birds that eat death trigger it almost universally. Vultures eat rotting flesh. Their entire existence is built around consuming decay. Crows and ravens pick at carcasses. Seagulls feed on waste and rot. Every parasite, every bacterium, every pathogen that thrives in death has had direct access to these birds. Eating them is not just unpleasant. It is genuinely dangerous, and your brain knows this without you ever having to think about it. The disgust response fires automatically, before logic, before reason, before you consciously decide anything. You see a vulture and your stomach says no. You don't know why, you just know. That reflex has been protecting the human species for an extraordinarily long time, and it still runs inside you today. Every time you feel vague disgust at something unfamiliar on a plate. Every time your stomach turns at a smell before you can even name it. That is the exact same ancient system. Still running. Still doing its job. So now we have three categories. Songbirds too small to bother with. Predators too toxic to safely eat. Carrion birds too biologically dangerous to approach. That covers almost every wild bird species on Earth. So what did humans actually eat? We made our own. This is the part of the story almost no one thinks about, because today chicken is so ordinary we barely consider it as food anymore. We just eat it. Without wonder, without curiosity. A chicken breast is just a chicken breast. But about 8,000 years ago, a bird called the red jungle fowl lived quietly in the forests of Southeast Asia, and it became the most important bird in human history. Domesticated initially in what is now modern-day China and India, studied by archaeologist Joris Peters in research from 2022, the chicken solved every single problem at once. It was small enough to keep in huge numbers. It ate scraps and leftover grain. It reproduced fast. It was calm enough to handle. And it tasted completely neutral. No bitterness, no strong gamey notes, no accumulated toxins from a predatory diet. Just clean, mild, accessible protein. The chicken was never exciting. That was exactly the point. It was the most reliable, the most manageable, the one that worked, and it spread across the entire planet over the following millennia until today there are more chickens alive on Earth than any other bird species. More than 30 billion of them, 3 times the human population. One domesticated bird, everywhere, while sparrows still fly past your window, untouched. And now for the footnote that changes everything. There is one small bird that humans actually did eat, deliberately, obsessively. It was a songbird, technically a species of bunting. It weighed about 25 grams and had almost no meat on its body. And in France for centuries, it was considered the most extraordinary, most profound, most emotional food experience a person could have. The Ortolan bunting. It was caught in nets during migration. fattened in complete darkness on millet and grapes until it doubled in weight, then drowned in Armagnac brandy, roasted whole, eaten in 1 or 2 bites, bones and all. French diners would traditionally cover their heads with a cloth while eating it, not as ceremony, but to trap the aroma inside a private darkness, to make the experience total and inescapable. French President François Mitterrand famously ate ortolan as his final meal in 1996, just days before his death. The bird was already illegal in France by then, protected under European Union conservation law since 1979. He ate it anyway. 8 of them. The European Union banned ortolan hunting formally in 1999. The tradition is technically gone, but the fact that it existed at all tells you something extraordinary about the human relationship with birds. We didn't avoid them because we never tried. We tried everything, and through thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, of sickness and survival, of math and instinct and religion and law, we built an incredibly precise invisible fence around the birds that don't work. And inside that fence, we put the chicken, and we built the modern world on it. So here is what is actually happening when you walk through that forest and feel nothing toward the sparrow on the branch. It is not indifference, it is not ignorance. It is thousands of years of compressed survival knowledge playing out silently in your nervous system in the space of a single moment. Your brain has already done the math. It has already run the disgust check. It has already filtered through ancient categories of safe and dangerous, worth it and not worth it. And it has delivered its verdict before you even formed a conscious thought. Most of the decisions you make about food don't feel like decisions. They feel like facts. The sparrow is just not food, the way a rock is not food. But it isn't a fact, it's a filter built over 10,000 years of human error and survival. And here is what that means for you: the foods you eat, the foods you refuse, the things that turn your stomach without reason, the things that feel safe and the things that feel wrong. Almost none of it is yours. You didn't choose it. It was loaded into you before you were born, refined by every generation that came before you, delivered to you not as a memory, but as a feeling, not as knowledge, but as instinct. The version of you that exists today is the result of every single ancestor who made the right call and lived. The sparrow is still on the branch. It hasn't moved. And in the oldest, quietest part of your brain, a decision was already made the moment you saw it. You didn't even notice it happening. But it never stops.